Someone's gonna take me alive. The time has come to make things right.
This man is Adolf Hitler. But before this video begins, I gotta point out something. He has the stupidest mustache I've ever seen. So I'm gonna go onto Google and search stupid mustache. Look, it's the second thing. Alright, it's really not what I was looking for. But I'm gonna go onto images and I'm gonna scroll down. Can you see it? Can you see the stupid mustache? I'll give you a clue. It's next to question mark. Boom! There it is. Stupid Hitler. It's not Hitler because this guy's actually British, but he's still got a stupid mustache! Anyways, this guy is a fascist, specifically he's a Nazi, which means that they hate Jews. And that's racist. Don't be racist, kids. They form an alliance with Japan, because they're also fascist. And Italy is also fascist, and they're like, friends. And Germany and Japan are like, yeet, because they're also fascist too. Anyway, so now Germany wants to invade Austria, because they want to. And Austria happily complies, because they like Germany, because Germany is just cool. Deal with it. So in Czechoslovakia, there is a place called the Sudetenland, where ethnic Germans live. And Britain and France are like, no, don't do it. But he took over the rest of Czechoslovakia anyway and made an alliance with the Soviet Union, to then invade Poland, which they succeeded in. Yay, well done Germany, you started a world war. The two split the country, kind of like NATO and the Soviet Union split Germany, but we'll get to that later. But Britain and France declared war on Germany, but not the Soviet Union for some reason. After this, there was a period of time called the Phony War, where everyone just sat around not doing much. But then came Operation Fall Gleb, where Germany took over Denmark, Norway, and the Netherlands, which unfortunately succeeded, which means now Germany has quite a lot of Europe. But now Hitler goes for the Schlieffen Plan again. He invades France through Belgium. Germany puts a lot of effort into making the Schlieffen Plan work again. French and British went to meet the Germans at lightning speed, but the Germans had a new tactic: blitzkrieg. They let the Allies advance into Belgium and then cut them off in the Ardennes in France. They made the Allies evacuate at a place in France called Dunkirk. Here, the Germans wiped out France's best armies and nearly took out Britain in the process. After squeezing the Allies out of Dunkirk, the Germans breezed through, taking Paris, and France fell. What Hitler did was devastating. He did what the Germans couldn't do in World War I. Also, after the invasion of France, Italy joined World War II. Hitler knew that Britain wouldn't give up no matter what, thanks to Winston Churchill's morale-boosting speeches, so we need to make sure that Britain knew it was alone. Except Britain wasn't alone. Every single Commonwealth nation was backing the British, including Australia. The Soviet Union wanted some stuff back from Finland, Leningrad, so it declared war on Finland during the Winter War of 1940. But then it was kind of like a draw and neither of them won, but the Soviet Union took Finland's stuff, so Finland, you're pointless. But Hitler realized something could be done. He could invade Britain in something called Operation Sea Lion. And yes, that's actually what it's called. But it failed, miserably. Hitler was so mad that he began bombing civilian targets in the UK in something that became known as the Blitz. Sound familiar? Germany also made Hungary and Romania sign the Tripartite Pact, which is what made Italy, Japan, and Germany so close together, to keep them away from the Soviet Union. Also, speaking of which, Soviet Union, prepare for a surprise invasion from Germany. Wait, what? That's right, the Germans took over the Soviet Union using tactics that the Soviet Union had never seen before. Leningrad remained under siege the last 4 years, and the Germans were in sight of Moscow. So that's it, there's no hope. But then it got cold. Like, so unbelievably cold that no one could survive there. Well, apart from the Siberians. The Russians called in the Siberians to push the Germans back to the border, where they would stay there until the spring. Meanwhile, in Japan is taking over honestly too much stuff. But then it wants to take over stuff near Australia. But that means that they'll have to go overseas. So then they decide this. How about if we destroy the Pacific Fleet before they can even attack us? And so it was. Near the end of the year, in 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, which then dragged these guys into the war, the pesky United States of America. It was now finally spring on the Eastern Front, so the Germans could advance, but Hitler switched up his tactics. Down south of the Soviet Union, there was a place called the Caucasus in Georgia, where there was a lot of oil. Hitler's plan was to invade the Caucasus and take all the oil, while leaving one of the armies to deal with the key Soviet city of Stalingrad. The Russians fought hard, but they were no match for the Germans until they were like a copycat and copied the Germans' encircling movements. Eventually, the 6th Panzer Army had to surrender, and then the push back to Germany began. East Prussia was already in sight for the Russians, and the Germans stood no chance. After Rommel and his tank divisions, including the Italians, were pushed out of Africa, the Allies started managing to march up Italy. But then, also, the Americans decided to go for an invasion of the north of France. The operation was called D-Day. Don't ask why, because I don't know myself. They managed to get down to Brittany, and then they copied the copying Russians who were copying the Germans. Yes, it's complicated. They managed to circle the Germans in France, kind of like they were doing in the Soviet Union. But then some divisions in the south of France began to arrive, and the Germans knew they were screwed. They eventually surrendered, and then they were pushing up through Belgium, eventually marching into Germany. They began to go through Luxembourg and into the Netherlands, and Germany knew it messed up. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, the Americans were going up to the Japanese mainland with something called island hopping. And it's called that because they were hopping to the islands. But then they stopped, and I'll reveal why they did that later. Now, back to the war in Europe. France, Britain, and the United States, because the United States finally decided to get involved, I kept on forgetting George Switzerland this entire time, are now marching onto Germany. And Germany's like, oh, you remember that blitzkrieg thing we did so long ago? How about we do it again? They trap an American squad in the middle, and then more American squads break through to get their friends out, and now Germany is being squashed to like bits. And now the Ruskies have surrounded Berlin. So now Berlin is under siege, and you wanna know what happens next? Drum roll, please! Hitler's killed himself! So now the war in Europe is over, yay! But now the United States needs to declare war on Japan, or invade it. But how about a better idea? Let's nuke Japan instead! The atrocity was devastating, and Japan will never be the same after that. The bright side is, there's now victory, yay! And now, the country of Germany is split between the Soviet Union and NATO. And this will start a war, a very, very cold war.